Child Center Cemetery, Part 1. This is a topic you're going to hear me talk about a lot over the next year. And at the end, I'll tell you why. The Wisconsin State Public School for Dependent and Neglected Children opened its doors to child placements in 1886. If you haven't seen my video series about the Child Care Center, go back and watch it now. Various epidemics plagued the school. Diseases such as influenza, tuberculosis, polio, diphtheria, and even measles spread through the center quickly due to overcrowding. Many children died during these outbreaks. In May of 1898, a politician paid a visit to the center. A story was run on this in the newspaper, and in the article they stated that the cemetery held the bodies of 13 little boys and girls. When the state public school closed its doors for good on July 1st, 1976, the cemetery held the bodies of 305 babies and children. Each of these children assigned nothing but a number. Child Center Cemetery, Part 2. In 1947, the city of Sparta purchased a golf course known as the Sparta Municipal Golf Course near the Child Care Center. In 1982, 6 years after the closure of the state public school, the city of Sparta purchased what was formerly the school farmland. This purchase was made in order to expand the golf course. The golf course had to be built around the cemetery, and part of the deal was that the golf course would maintain the cemetery grounds, but this only included mowing. The golf clubhouse now sits where the old farmhouse used to. The majority of the care of the cemetery is left in the hands of volunteers. Notably, a man named Chris Barlow, who used to work as a groundskeeper for the golf course in the early 90s when it was renamed River Run Golf Course. The city used to have a fund for the maintenance of the cemetery, but the funds quickly depleted. Mr. Barlow developed a special interest in maintaining the cemetery after working side by side with a woman named June Laxton. Child Center Cemetery, Part 3. June Laxton had taken a special interest in maintaining the cemetery. Born in 1925, Mrs. Laxton had worked as a cottage matron at the state public school. For decades, no one had known who was buried at each grave in the cemetery. This bothered June greatly, and she worked tirelessly to help identify the children in the cemetery. June's big break came when Dr. Varsos, the former chief psychologist at the state public school, found a chart dictating who was buried in what grave in the basement of the Waupun State Prison. Dr. Varsos and June worked tirelessly for months, identifying all but 23 of the children. On Memorial Day of 1999, June unveiled a monument bearing a dedication and the names of all the children that rest in the cemetery. June Laxton passed away in 2006, and a monument just outside the cemetery was erected in her honor to tie her to these children she fought so hard for. Child Center Cemetery, Part 4. So why did these kids only have numbers? Why weren't their names on their tombstones? It isn't that they didn't care about the children, it's that Wisconsin had some pretty strange laws at the time. A minor's name couldn't be published, not even on a tombstone, without explicit consent of their parent. Because most of the children at the state public school had been abandoned, orphaned, neglected, and abused, there was no way to get parental permission. Because of this law, nothing was known about the children in this cemetery except the order in which they were buried until 1999. June Laxton was able to uncover the names of all but 23 children buried in the cemetery in 1999. But are names really enough? There is absolutely no information about any of these children except for their name. No one knows who their parents were, how they ended up at the child care center, what their birthday was, when they died, how they died. No one knows anything.